Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome to Quest Poly, the MARC series of interviews with the executive candidates for the SRC. I'm Kendra Perrin, Editor-in-Chief of the MARC, and with me here today are Nigel McKenzie and Eva Skipper, political analysts and correspondents. Third-year student Colin Wilt is running as an independent candidate for Minister of Finance. His platform includes promises to form a financial committee to move the role of funding proposals away from the full SRC, and also to have a guest from the student body sit in on each meeting with full voting powers.
So we'll start off, Colin. At the core of your platform is the proposal to create a financial committee that would move the role of funding away from the whole SRC into the funding committee. So I guess, why does this need to happen?
It's interesting because I recently submitted a proposal to the SRC, and Daniel has been my roommate, so I've been hearing about it for a while. And right now it seems that the SRC is spending most of its time working on proposals rather than focusing on their individual mandates. And so I want to kind of do two things. The first is allow the SRC ministers to focus more on their objectives outside of funding proposals. And the second is, I think that in like the cases that I was sitting in on, there's too many voices, and essentially too many votes depend on these very, very small issues that might not necessarily be either relevant or necessary to the particular proposal. So a lot of agendas and a lot of ideas flow into this. And so my proposal essentially would be a 5-person committee with 1 to 2 student voter. I still need to work on that idea a bit. And so that essentially allows for essentially it kind of tries to get rid of power blocks and allow the SRC ministers to focus more of the time on doing what they want to do rather than only proposals.
Do you think power blocking has been an issue this year?
I think so, yes.
Can you explain just briefly, in case people aren't familiar with the concept of power blocking?
So what I mean by power blocking is, in any case when you have a large group of people, you're eventually going to find people who agree with your ideas or agree with your agenda, and you kind of form a block of votes. So either yes votes or no votes or abstaining votes, stuff like that. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of how politics works, I guess. So I kind of want to limit that though, so I don't really have an articulate way of saying it other than that.
Okay, and can I ask, just would this eradicate the Tuesday meeting from being under the domain of the full SRC? Because the Tuesday meeting is pretty much entirely concerned with funding proposals?
Yeah, so what I want to do is I want to have a funding meeting, and then I want to have a meeting to do other things. And so because the SRC spent most of its time working on monetary proposals, that we don't really have an idea what that is yet. But I think that should be 2 separate things. So I'm focusing completely on a separate meeting at the moment and working up from there.
Okay. Just one more question about the financial committee. Would it be the 3 executive members plus a student voter plus who would the 5th member be?
So what I'm thinking is having a rotating panel in and out. And so right now I'm thinking either 1 or 2 permanent members. The permanent member would be the Minister of Finance, and then maybe 1 other permanent member. But other than that, I would want people to rotate in and out so we get a multitude of voices, and so we also eliminate that 1 power block. So if there's 2 permanent members, they're either going to be always clashing heads, always agreeing, or somewhere in the middle. And so I kind of want to avoid that. And I think it's that would be a way of getting more interesting votes and more interesting voices in the mix.
Are you from the States?
I am.
Have you been reading about the Supreme Court?
I have.
So following along this funding proposal thread, you have this idea of 1 guest voter.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's representative to have well, first of all, there's no possible way for the whole student body to have a chance to be on the funding proposal, or the funding body. So first of all, it doesn't seem to be quite representative, and then they're going to have control of 1/5 of the voting power for the budget. Do you think that's democratic, or?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It does give some students disproportionate influence over how the budget is perceived. So that is an issue I have to address. But the way I'm looking at it now, and it's essentially, that's the best way to phrase this. Can you rephrase the question so I can add an answer, and then I forgot it really quickly?
Yeah, sure. So there's no way for every student to be equally represented. There's just not enough time in a weekly if you only have 1 person per week. So is this democratic or representative?
So Yeah, I would argue one, it is representative because it's essentially the current honorary guest with voting powers. And so we're trying to get one person each week to come in, and so it does have that one person's view does skew things. But one thing that isn't, I don't have quite up there with my platform because I didn't want to make it too big is these proposals, I had a couple other rules built in there. One, all proposals would have to go up a week before they were actually voted on to get student, comments on them. And so that would go up. Then you'd have a student come in and vote, and then you'd have it's going to be 5 to 7 members voting on it from there.
Sorry, can I interrupt? So your proposed solution would be like, you have to submit them a week in advance, and then they'll be posted on the SRC website, students can make comments on them.
And so it's essentially, there is some student comments on the proposals now, and I want to increase that, and I kind of also want to increase student buy-in to the process. So that's kind of my thoughts behind it, and this is all contingent on, first of all, if elected to Minister of Finance, I'd work up with the system. I talk with current ministers to see what they would think wouldn't work with my idea, factor that in, and then this would ultimately be put to a referendum, I think, is the only way to do that.
Right, but I still think that it's not quite representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you only...
Or I guess maybe we could ask, what issue or problem or caveat on the current SRC is this trying to rectify? Or what inspired you to come up with this policy?
It's essentially looking at how ministers allocate their time, and also it's because you have ministers who, when you're looking at a proposal, it fits within certain boundaries and certain ministerial positions, right? So I'll give an example for rugby. It's not the one that led me to run or led me to devise this method, but you have ministers like the concentration rep or academic rep coming in and submitting and voting on that. And how is that any more or less democratic than my ideal? The only thing I'm doing is having a few less voters on the panel.
Mm-hmm. But specifically, the guest voter,
Yeah,
like
the guest
randomly selected student, what inspired you, or what are you trying to do with that?
It was a student buy-in idea more than anything else.
Okay.
And so it is weird, and it's this little thing that I really need to work up on. I think it's important because right now I don't feel that there's a lot of student engagement within the SRC. To give like a personal example, up until this year, I've had absolutely nothing to do with the SRC because one, I don't feel that they particularly represent my interests, and two, it's not really a student government. It's really, in my interest or my idea, it looks like a funding body more than anything else that occasionally puts on events. And I want that to change because we should have a little bit more power, and we should have more kind of buy-in to the student government because they're supposed to be representing us.
As students.
As students, exactly. And that's kind of my idea behind it, and it's by far not perfect, but hopefully with a little bit more work it will be, or as close to as possible. I don't think anything would really be perfect.
So you say that you hadn't been to any SRC meetings before this year. About how many have you been to this year?
3.
3? Okay. So I'm just curious why we should believe that you know what needs to change with SRC finances if your exposure to the current SRC
Yes, that's a fair question. First of all, Daniel Herman is my roommate, so I've been hearing about SRC stuff for this entire year, and usually he comes back, and I can't really speak for him. I can just give my comment to that. So usually there's a little bit of frustration with all his time is spent looking at proposals or doing like these kind of office hour work when he wants to be looking at academic stuff. And so that's kind of the thing that inspired the change more than anything else. Is I think SRC ministers could do so much more and inspire more events, more projects, more stuff like that if they have a little bit of time that they're not spending focusing only on monetary proposals. Okay. So that's kind of how I think I have a little bit of an idea. I don't have a full idea, of course.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So other than Daniel's feedback, have any other kinds of research informed your platforms? Have you looked at precedent at other universities where student governments have some kind of separation?
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It is interesting. My idea is very similar to the platform James is running on.
Yeah.
He's also looking at the idea of a financial subcommittee. I do it a little bit differently than he does, and that's from 2 different angles of looking. And I've done a little bit of research, glancing at ideas, but it's more of, I think this would be a little bit better if we break it into a subcommittee rather than having 11 voices. I've been using the song Too Many Cokes as a good example. Is at this point, you want enough voices that does represent people, but you don't want too many, otherwise it becomes a little bit of a slog because, like on the rugby proposal, to give another example of the same thing, we spent about 20 to 30 minutes debating over these little tiny things, like things have gotten stolen in the past, what are you going to do to fix that? We're kind of one of those, we'll cross the bridge when we get there. We can talk to athletics, and also no one's going to steal a 50-pound bag, unlike soccer balls. So it's little things like that inspire the changes more than anything else.
And you're perceiving that as a waste of ministers' time, basically.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why you don't maybe have as many people going to SRC meetings, because it's like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, because I had a comment, saying, I'm a student, I don't have like this much time to go, spend on like this little thing, like going and talking to like a candidate about stuff like that. And for 2.5 hours is a big block. Like if I'm blocking at 2.5 hours, it better be something, interesting, it better be something good, yeah.
Totally.
So I want to talk specifically about the part of your platform where you say you want to implement a policy to put a 2-month buffer on proposals over $1,500. So they'll have to be proposed 2 months before they're actually going to take place.
Yeah.
But this year, almost every single meeting has included a proposal over $1,500. Do you think this policy will encourage students to engage in better long-term planning for big events, things that cost $1,500? Or does it just mean students are going to propose less events because they won't be able to think that far ahead?
Yeah, so the idea definitely needs to change, because I was actually thinking about the same thing today of the rugby budget ideas and stuff like that. They came into kind of fruition. It took about a month from beginning to submission process. And so I might think of submitting that down to 1 month or a couple of weeks. But the idea behind it is the same idea as I think Marcella's group brought up as well, is you don't want the situation where the SRC is almost pressured to fund a big ticket item. Like they give the example of Dancing Bear on their website, whereas I agree that, I personally wanted to fund the whole $10,000 for the artists, but it was kind of was a sticking point, because it's either we get the money and we get them, or we don't get the money and we lose them. And it's the same thing. There was like a speaking colloquium. I'm saying that totally wrong, I'm sorry. But it's essentially, we have someone booked, we have the advertisement, we just need the money now. And that was a very contentious issue at the SRC. And so that's what I want to try to fix, is either a month or a couple weeks in advance. You have to have planning. If it's a big ticket item, you have to come in front of us, so we don't feel the pressure to do that, and we can actually make the decision whether it is in the best interest of Quest to fund this.
So it's making the possibility of a no somewhat more feasible?
Without putting proposers in an awkward position where they have to rescind promises that they made, or...
I mean, in both cases, I agree they should have been funded. It just is, because when you're looking at the SRC ministers, I think only one is running for re-election, or one is looking at running again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a burnout rate that, frankly, is really weird, because when you're looking at student government, especially in universities, these are generally students who, this is something they want to do in the future. It's not always the case, but having some kind of role in student government or government in general. Yeah. And so when you have people who that should be their passion, it's weird that it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. So it's kind of, that's another thing that kind of plays a little part in my campaign.
I think that's it for me.
Yeah. Great. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much to Colin for joining us on Quest Poly. And remember that regardless of who you vote for, just go out and vote this Friday, February 26th. Thank you very much.